Okay, our interview for Coconuts TV today is with Sammy Morgan. Sammy played for Cambridge from 1977 through to 1979. 34 appearances, I'm sure we'll talk about that. And is near to a legend, I think, as there are among Cambridge supporters, for several incidents, which I'm sure we'll get to. So, Sammy, thanks very much for inviting us along today. It's great to be here with you. Let's go into your background, your family and that sort of thing. Where were you born and when were you born?
I was born in Belfast, 46. My father was from Belfast and my mother was from Great Yarmouth. My dad was stationed in Great Yarmouth during the war and met my mother, and hence that's a long story as to how I end up now back here in Great Yarmouth. My dad was a musician by trade and within the army, and he had a dance band after that in the era of dance bands over in Belfast. And then sort of in the late 50s when work was becoming scarce and dance bands were changing. I don't know what it was, rock and roll or what you may name it. But my dad used to come over every summer and play in the summer shows and the orchestras, and in the winter and perhaps in the pantomimes. And so as work was becoming scarce in Belfast from that angle, he came across here. And as well as he came over here in 58, he opened a bar and called the Suspension Tavern near the river, and we were there for 13 years. So Belfast for me is home, but Great Yarmouth is home, but Belfast is over home.
Yes, of course.
So I'm an anglicised Ulsterman now.
So you were about 12 when you came across
12 years when I came over.
Years with a background in playing football?
Football, yes. I mean, I started off at Nettlefield School first of all, funny enough, where it surfaced years later that I was on the same little class as George Best. Didn't realise it at the time. And I came over here and, in Belfast I went to Nettlefield, and then I went to Grosvenor High School. And below me, George was in the same year group there, and I still didn't know. So I had 1 year in the high school there, and then came across here. And I went to technical high school here in Gorleston. And I had a great mentor, and a chap called Arthur Bowles, who was my sports teacher, who did great for me. I turned up as a little waif from raggy arse trousers in Belfast, and everybody had a brown uniform, and I had a black blazer, second-hand blazer, and we didn't have too much. And Arthur looked after me. I loved me football, and all those friends that I had back then footballing at Tech High School, they all remain friends still now.
Now there seems to have been a bit of a tradition in Gorleston. Various players come from there. I mean, numerous. Brian Bogus is the one that we remember very well. Still lives in
that's right, Buggy does, yeah.
But there were several others from.
There was Buggy, there was Dave Stringer, there was Mike Bailey, Peter Simpson, and myself, and obviously I've mentioned Dave, I think Dave Stringer. And it's funny that Brian Bogus you mentioned there. Brian Bogus later on went on to manage Wisbech, and funny enough I was at Gorleston playing then at the Gorleston first team, and Buggy wanted me to sign for Ipswich, so there was a connection there. Cambridge runs through my career a little bit. Well, you can tell that later on, but so I started at Gorleston Football Club.
And you had trials for Ipswich?
Ipswich, I was tiny. I came over here, I was 12 years of age, and I used to play for the town boys, Yarmouth under-14s. I used to play for the under-14s and under-15s. I played a year up even though I was tiny. And I was inside forward then.
Right.
So I was I was probably about a Springsy of my day, you know what I mean? Yeah, I was small, but I was nippy. I was a good footballer, talented. And but at 14, 15, 16, I had trials at Arsenal and Ipswich. That's when Ramsey was there. I had the good fortune to go down, it would have been around about 1960, when they had the great Ipswich team, and I trained with them outside, the Ledbetters and the Ted Phillips, but they said I was too small. Ralph Ramsey, they said I was too small, so that was fine. And as time moved on, it looked as though I was going to miss out. But I still loved my football, started at Gorleston Minors, and then I was playing for Norfolk, Gorleston Minors, Gorleston Reserves, Gorleston First Team, and I started to shoot up 18, 19, 20. Rather than me trying, I shot up a bit and didn't feel that way too much, but I went up that way. And they put me centre forward, and I moved. That's how it all happened.
Okay, so you've had your trials with Ipswich and Arsenal. Did you think at that stage that you wouldn't make it as a pro?
I just loved my football. I didn't live for anything else. I didn't live for girls. I had a drink, or I just lived for football. I love football. But as I said, when I left school, I went into accountancy.
Yeah.
And but I realised that, and the football I was playing, and it didn't seem to be going. Didn't get a chance anywhere, or
Yeah.
I was too small. And then I started knocking them in for Galston, and I just loved it. But I was in accountancy, and I thought, no, this is not quite for me. I still had sport in me and people in me. I was a people person, and I thought I'd like to go teaching. And
Yeah.
I left Lovell Blake, who were the chartered accountants, and I went to Tech College for a year and got my extra A levels that I needed. And then I went to Nottingham College of Education, a teacher training college, for 3 years. And it was whilst I was there, I progressed. I still came home every weekend to play for Galston. And it was then that I progressed, and I had a chance to go to Port Vale.
Yeah.
And the tie-up with Cambridge and Villa thread is that the manager of Galston was a man called Roger Carter. He was an ex-pro, an ex-Villa pro, Roger Carter. And he's been a good friend to me as well. And it was his recommendation from Galston to Gordon Lee at Port Vale, another ex-Villa colleague, that got me on trial at Port Vale.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent my first year at college travelling home every weekend to play for Galston. Won the senior cup and everything that year.
Yeah.
But it was too much. And also, I had the opportunity to go to Port Vale to see how I got on, and I wanted to have a go, and I did. And I went up there as part-time while I was teacher training at college, and that's how it moved on for me.
So you were part-time with Port Vale?
As part-time initially.
But by this stage, you're 22 years old.
I'm 22,
So
yeah.
that's quite late for...
60. I went to college 68 to 71.
Uh-huh.
That was from the ages of 22 to 25. So
Mm.
I was even a couple of years late getting to
Yeah.
college.
Yeah.
I've always told the wife I'm a late developer, you see. So I was late. But you see, I loved my amateur career.
Yeah.
But then when I got into my football career and doing well, the time had started to go.
Yes. Yes.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't just up and coming. I was in the middle of it, just going beyond that middle area. You understand?
But you seem to have hit it with a bang, because you became Port Vale's top scorer in
I did, yeah.
72-73.
I went from college up to, and I noticed a difference when I had a full pre-season,
Yes.
and full training.
Yeah.
When I first went there, I was at college and I was travelling over just to matches. I found that difficult fitness-wise, but then when I got into full-time training, I hit the ground running then, and I did well at Port Vale, and Gordon Lee was great with me. Gordon Lee was wonderful, and I said he was a friend of Roger Carter at Galston, and they gave me the opportunity, but you've got to take the opportunity, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And it was hard because it was completely alien to me. You know, I'd come from an amateur club, went up there away, didn't know anybody really, and it was hard. I understand people, you know, maybe checking in. There's one stage I did come home, I thought, it ain't for me, it's not for me this. Initially I didn't feel the camaraderie and the spirit was what it was at my amateur club.
Yeah.
But then I came home for a fortnight and I thought, I'll regret this for the rest of my life if I don't go back. And I went back, and I'm glad I did, yeah.
Now it's interesting, because that's something that we hear from players, that is how important the pre-season is to hitting the ground running to the rest of the season. As non-players ourselves, we don't understand that.
If you don't get the pre-season under your belt, you're always playing catch-up.
Yes.
If you have a good pre-season, I mean, when I was at Villa with Ron Saunders, who was manager, he was a hard taskmaster.
Yeah.
That was the fittest I'd ever been. You know, he'd take you up and down the hills and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
We used to do that down with Doherty as well a bit. But Ron Saunders was a different kettle of fish. I always remembered him doing some hill work with us. And we did it. We did 4 sessions with 4 circuits of this, and then we had a break, and we did 3 circuits. Then we did break in 2 circuits. Then we came on. We were on our knees, and the lad, he said, "Come on then," and we thought 4, 3, 2. We thought it was 1. He said 5. Well, I can remember that to this day. And he said 5, and everybody went, "Oh." But we done it,
Yeah.
and that's what I say to kids. You don't understand. I remember saying to Jordan Rose, he said to me once late in the game that he didn't have nothing left. I said, "You don't know what you've got left, Sam." And when he started scoring goals late on in games, he got in touch with me. He said, "Sammy, I remember what you told me." You see?
Okay, during your Port Vale time, right, very early in your career still,
Yeah.
professional career, you were called up by Northern Ireland.
Yeah, that was a huge one. There's a little story. I've always wanted to play for Northern Ireland. Always wanted. That was my dream to play as a kid. Dream to play. In my books at home, it was Danny Blanchflower, Derek Dougal, Jimmy McElroy, Billy Bingham. They're all in 1958. I had me scrap, but there's all of those in it. And we were playing York City on a Saturday, away at York City, and I was poor that day. And on coming back on the bus, you get a number of boys that play cards, and you get a number of boys that sit and talk maybe football.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of the ones that sat and chatted football and just chatted generally. And we were sitting talking about it. Tony Lacey was the captain. We got talking. He was a good friend of mine, looked after me when I was up there. And we were talking about the game and how we played, etc., being honest. And I said, the way I play today, I said, I'd like to play for Northern Ireland, but I play like that. I said, I've got no chance. You're honest and you're open with each other. Monday morning I was in training, and we did our training at Port Vale's big ground. And afterwards, Tony Lacey was always a very fit lad. I used to follow him, and he used to say, do you fancy come up and do some steps up and down the terraces? I said, yeah, I'll come up with you. So I remember we got up the end terraces, up the Hamel Road end, up down to the terraces. And as we were doing it, this would have been about 12:30 or something, Gordon Lee came across and shouted, Sammy, can you come on? I've got something to tell you. And he called me in. He said, you've been picked to play, you've been selected for this Northern Ireland squad on Wednesday. So from playing poor against York City on a Saturday and getting beat, I'm called up on a Monday morning to play against Spain on the Wednesday in a European Nations Cup. Now the match was at Hull City's ground, Boothbury Park, and the reason it was there, because the manager of Ireland was Terry Neal, who was the manager of Hull City at the time. So because of the problems in Belfast in 1962, Northern Ireland had to play away from home. And I'll tell you about that in a moment. So we were playing at Boothbury Park. So I had to make my way up to Boothbury Park. So I went back to my digs, got my bags. I had an old Spitfire car, old battered out car, got my bags. Up I went to Boothbury Park, up to Scarborough. We were staying at Scarborough, not far from Hull. And we stayed at the big hotel, the Grand Hotel. And I've seen it on the television. And I still want to go back and stay there one night, because that's where I stayed. And I remember going up there. I don't know whether I was nervous or whether I wasn't, but I was not living the dream, but it was something I always wanted to do, and I was doing it. Anyway, I gets up there, park my car somewhere, walks up to the Grand Hotel, and the big revolving doors. Amazing what you remember. And there's all the cameras there, cameramen were there. And I thought, big time, this is it, I made it. Really, something like that, this is what it's all about. What I didn't realise was it wasn't me they were after, it was George Best. George hadn't turned up, he had gone AWOL again. So he hadn't turned up. So anyway, I turned up, met all the lads and everything. They were playing table tennis and things like that, and I'm not bad at table tennis, so I immediately got in and played, and I was winning a few, so immediately I was into the group. And we played on the Wednesday. George eventually turned up on the Tuesday, I think. Sammy McIlroy, for example, I've read in his autobiography, Sammy made his debut on that day against Spain in 1972, in February, the same as I did. He made his debut at 22, and I made my debut at 26. He was from Manchester United, I was from Port Vale. But we were all treated the same, and that was how wonderful it was. Sammy McIlroy says in his autobiography that he went on the Monday morning to get the train from Manchester station to Hull, and he's supposed to meet George there, and George didn't turn up. Now don't forget, Sammy's a 17-year-old, and he's waiting to go, and this pro, George, hasn't turned up, and so Sammy does it by himself. So I played, I scored, George passed it to me, and I scored. We drew 1-1. Terry Neal made a mistake and they scored. The goalkeeper was Erie Barr, and the centre half was Gallego from Barcelona. And a couple of years earlier I was playing on the pitches in Locally, and I was up against this fella, Erie Barr, one of the best goalkeepers in the world, and Gallego, Barcelona centre half. And I didn't have a bone in my body, it was frightened of anything.
It's incredible, because
Isn't that amazing?
That's normally something you associate with a 17-year-old, who's not learned to fear yet. But you, as you say, were 26.
Well, because I still think I was naive. I still think I just loved my football, and I was a late developer, and I was naive in some ways, and yet I couldn't have been that naive, because I'd been through college, I'd gone up to college, I'd held down a job, hadn't I? And but I just loved my football. And this was when we went to the hotel, and they brought me I've still got it upstairs, I can show it to you. they brought me my tracksuit. I hung that tracksuit on the wall, on the wardrobe, on the wall, and I went to sleep, and my tracksuit with my Irish badge was looking at me. And when I woke up,
Wonderful.
and I've still got it up there from then. I bought it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, can I buy it? I didn't take it, didn't pinch it.
Yeah.
I think I paid for it. Because that's what I wanted. I've got my shirt over there, I'll show you.
Again, I would have thought you might even have been more impressed, you know, more nervous about meeting the Irish players that you had watched on TV and you had seen them.
No, I wasn't nervous. I was nervous in the fact that I didn't know them.
Yeah.
And probably also because I was from Port Vale and they were all, in those days, Pat Jennings, Pat Rice, Sammy Nelson, Alan Hunter, Derek Dugan, Eric McMurday, all of those, Davy Clemens, Tommy Jackson. You know, they're all at bigger clubs than me, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter at all. And it was only when I got there with George and that, and a later day, did I then come across this photograph of my mother in my school at Nettlefield. I can show it to you. I've got it on the computer if you want to see it. You can get a copy of it. George standing behind me. And it's only then that we realised that we were together. And years later, when I would take the boys from Norwich when I was academy manager at Norwich and Ipswich, take them over to Northern Ireland, the chap came to see me. He was on that same photograph, and he was at Port Rush for the tournament, and he then told me the people who were on the photograph, and George and him and me and so on. Amazing how he's now died, he died through cancer, but
Indeed.
Tom. And it's amazing how it all comes together.
Yes, indeed.
And I said, 10 years ago, me and my two brothers went across. I could have gone across to the Irish party, I'm sure, but I didn't. The three of us went together and we stood at Stormont in the pouring rain for the funeral.
Yeah.
And that was my way of respect for George, you know.
Absolutely.
He was the best ever.
Yeah.
Best ever. One other story I'll tell you. After that match at Spain, that was in February, the home internationals were in June, and Dugan was back fit again. I was visiting, so I was left out, even though I'd scored. And George did a runner and didn't play. He did a runner, so there was a space left there, and I was hoping I'd get called up, but I didn't. They didn't call anybody up. So if anybody could have been rather bitter about George, and anyway, it could have been me, because he let Northern Ireland have not turning up, just disappeared, and I'd played, done well, and then was left out. But in no way ever was I better, because I thought I still do think he's the best ever. They say, don't they say, Maradona good, Pele better, George best. Yeah. That's what they say to me. And I played, he made a return for Northern Ireland against Portugal in Lisbon, and I played. And I played up the middle. Trevor Anderson from Manchester United played on the right, and George Best played on the left. And he turned up overweight, and they selected him, he was overweight. And I remember playing, I remember coming in at half time, and I was playing in between these two lads up front, and I was working my legs off. It's okay, I didn't mind. But I remember coming in at half time, coming down the tunnel behind George, and looking at him, and I was shattered. What I'd been doing, I'd been giving it all. And I felt so sorry for him. That there in front of me was my hero, my idol. That position he was in because of his illness. And I felt for him. Didn't feel angry, I felt. But he has never dropped in he never blamed anybody else. I've seen him in a hotel room signing wads of hotel picture headed paper for people. Big Pat Jennings, who was a most wonderful gentleman, was over there. Nobody wanted Pat, they just wanted George. They just wanted George. And I can understand that, absolutely wonderful. He could do things walking that other people couldn't do running. Sammy McIlroy was on the bench that day. George was going to get hauled off by the manager. And I remember back from a corner, the ball was knocked out to George. He got the ball at his feet, he dipped the shoulder, somebody came in, he nutmegged him. He dipped the shoulder to the next one, he nutmegged him and hit a beautiful ball out to Liam O'Kane, he was going up on the right-hand side. And the manager said to Sammy on the side, Sammy, just sit down for a minute, let him carry on. He could do that walking.
So, I mean, you as you say, to play with, there must be some players you play with that you just everyone in the field recognises is different class. So, How do you? I mean, you must have played against some superb players as well as playing with the best of this world.
Right.
How do you combat someone like that? I mean, what was your strength? What was your?
I mean, for me, I think a certain naivety of youth, if you want to call it. I mean, it took me ages to get some video way back. I got a video there when I played for Ireland against England at Goodison Park against Roy McFarland. I've got Roy's shirt upstairs, England shirt, by the way. And he's probably got my green one, which he would have.
We'll ask him.
We'll ask him and tell him I've got his England shirt if everybody wants a picture of it. And sorry, where were we? We were how we combat.
Yeah,
but I had no fear. I was nervous before games and I wanted to do well, and you never knew how you felt before the game. That didn't indicate how you were going to perform. Sometimes you felt great before the game, and when you'd gone and you'd nothing in your legs. Sometimes maybe you felt tired and that before the game, and when the game lit up, you were okay. Didn't seem to matter what training you did during the week. It didn't seem to tally with how you felt on a Saturday. Sometimes floodlit games and evening games, you were full of energy, freshness. I didn't like the hot weather particularly. It seemed to drain me. Better on a dirty night, wet, windy night, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? There was a bit of muck and bullets flying about, maybe. But I think it was. But as you got older, and also maybe your little wisdom. Sometimes maybe you're carrying injuries, which generally speaking you were a lot of the times. Your brain would take over, and sometimes you're a better player because you reserve your energy and your movement. Instead of being maybe a little bit of a headless chicken to do things up front, you'd maybe let your brain take over. And that's how the older players do. The brain takes over their legs, and that's how they last. So.
Yeah. Okay, well let's move on with your football league career then. You moved to Aston Villa.
I went from Port Vale to Villa. One of the signposts I think was I played for Port Vale against Villa. And we played at Port Vale in the Vale Park, and we were 4-0 down, and we came back to 4-4, and I scored a couple there against Neil Raylock, who's still a good friend of mine. I think I slaughtered Neil on that day. And I think it was on that day I probably raised the flag with Villa, hang on, there's a centre forward here, maybe not bad. And it was then Villa were struggling for pennies and so on and so forth. And they'd gone down into third division, Andy Lockhead was ageing, and that's when they got me. And that's how they got me.
August of 1973.
Pardon?
August 1973.
I would have been, no, it would have been, I would probably later than that, I think. It's probably later than that, and probably 70, 72, I would think. Yeah.
Okay, good. So you were sidelined because you were injured. You had a groin injury, took you out for a fair bit of the season.
Yeah, I had a groin injury at Port Vale, and I went in and had a manipulation in the Stoke Hospital under anaesthetic. And then I went to Villa. I was fine, and then I just seemed to rip the groin, and I couldn't shake it. And a lot of people had it at that time. They told me it was like the pelvic bone and the cartilage in between the pelvic bone, like a lady who gives birth. Yeah. There's movement in your pelvic bone with that cartilage, but wear and tear of that had caused me a problem. And I had some injections at the Villa, but it dogged me for a time, It dogged me for a while. And a lot of people have had that. Mullery had it. I got in touch with him at the time, funny enough, and he just said only thing he could do is rest it. And so as a consequence of that, I played early doors in that year when we went up, and when we won the League Cup that year as well. And I had to sit out at Wembley when we won the League Cup. But fortunately I played at Wembley with Ireland, so it wasn't such a double whammy that I'd actually played at Wembley. So that's what done me at Villa. But I had great moments at the Villa, and I loved the Villa. And if you're talking about big clubs, that was the biggest club I've been with, and that's special, yeah.
Now, around that time, and because of your injury, Villa signed
Andy Gray.
A young fellow.
Andy Gray. Well, it was a good replacement, Sam, wasn't it? I could have no complaints about that, could I?
No, he's
absolutely
even Andy Gray.
No, and once again, I moved on. I had great times at Villa. I said the big moment I mentioned to you earlier was the Bob Wilson incident.
Yes.
The Villa fans, you mention me, and they'll mention Villa. Or they'll mention Arsenal and Bob Wilson. We played at Highbury in the 4th or 5th round of the Cup in January, way back in '74. We were in what was then the Championship. Arsenal were in the Premiership, and we went there, and we gave them a good account of ourselves, and we went 1-up. I scored a diving header, a ball from Chico Hamilton from the left, and then it was getting a bit tasty, And Bob Wilson, that was the time you could get in front of a goalkeeper and cause him a few problems and stop him kicking and generally give him a little bit of jip. And he lost the plot. And then late in the game, or sorry, 3/4 way through the game, I went through, he came out, we collided. But referee was Clive the Book. And he sent me off, uproar in the crowd, replay Villa Park. On the Sunday, the papers were full of it. Wilson had made a meal of it. All the Villa supporters slaughtered him. He came out of Villa Park, 40-odd thousand. They booed him from the start to the end. Every ball that was coming across into the centre, I thought Sammy was going to hit it. Anyway, I scored again. We beat them 2-0. And at the end, I've got a lovely picture of me and him coming off shaking hands. And that's what football was about. And as I said to you earlier, I had a bit of an illness last year. And Bob rang up. He said, "You don't know who this is, do you?" 40 years ago. I said, "Mr. Wilson?" He said, "Yes, it is, Sammy." And that's what football was then, and those people still are now, and I'm not sure whether the game is like that now.
I think there were more gentlemen around at that time.
Yeah.
You moved to Brighton in December '75 under Peter Taylor, I believe.
Peter Taylor, yeah. Once again, I left. We got promotion again at Villa, and we won it. But I wanted to play regular, and Brighton came in for me, and so did Cardiff. Jimmy Andrews at Cardiff, and Peter Taylor came in for me. There's a tie-up there with Peter Taylor. Peter Taylor was formerly with Cloughie, and Cloughie was with him at Brighton and then left. Yeah. When I was at Port Vale, we played Derby. This is when I first joined. To forget, we played Derby in a pre-season game, and Derby had the top team, didn't they? Hector, O'Hare, Hennessy, McFarland, all of those boys. And I played a second half in a friendly against them, and Clough liked me. And he told Gordon Lee, "Can he have me on loan?" And Gordon says, "Well, if he's not in my first team at the beginning of the season, you can have him." Well, as it happened, I was. And I played in the first team, and I went to Swansea and scored my debut. So I never went to Derby. I often wondered what might have been. But so Peter Taylor was there. So obviously when I became available at Villa, Peter Taylor was at Brighton. Obviously he'd done his homework. I went to Brighton. And that's how I ended up at Brighton. So I went to Brighton. Peter Taylor was there. Peter was a great finder of players, but I found that from a management point of view, that I don't think that was his forte. I think Cloughie's forte was getting you to play. Taylor's forte was finding players, and that's a combination. They worked individually. I'm not sure whether they worked.
Interesting. So you stayed at Brighton, obviously.
Yeah. We got Peter Taylor left.
Yes.
With heart complaints, and Alan Mullery came. And Alan Mullery came, and in the pre-season, the nature of what we played Luton in a friendly, and a big high ball came up and I went for it, and Paul Future hit me and broke all my cheekbone. You know, there's a biter bit really, wasn't it? In me, you give and took, so you took it. But that put me out for a few months. I came back, and that was the days when you only had one sub. So I would play, Ian Mellor came in, ex-Man City, ex-Norwich, and Peter Ward came in. So there was the three of us, and three of us were different. So they rotated the way they played. I generally played the tough games away from home, and then I was sub at home, and that's the way it worked. And we got promotion again. But again, I wanted to play regular. And because we got promotion, but I wanted to play regular. And that was then I said, look, I want to leave because I want to play regular if I'm not going to be playing. And that's when Big Ron came in for me at Cambridge.
We had heard there were two teams interested at that time.
Yes. Preston did Nobby Styles, yeah. I went up to Nobby, up to Preston when Nobby was there, yeah, lovely man. Yeah, I loved him, I thought he was a wonderful person. But Big Ron, again, the connection, again, with Villa, Ron Atkinson was best man at Roger Carter's wedding, who managed me at Galston.
Oh, goodness me.
So they were friends, so obviously contacts in football, they all knew me as a player, and they knew me as a person. Because you need to know that. Yeah. Big Pete Taylor was very, that was top of his agenda as well. What was a person like? So they knew what I was like as a person, and I fitted into what Cambridge wanted. And that was that was why I decided to go to Cambridge. Also, you know, I was coming back towards this area. And I joined Cambridge and didn't have any regrets at all.
Okay, they asked for a fee at that time, wasn't it? £15,000.
That's right.
The figure we had. And there was a little bit of negotiation went on there.
I
with
think
Brighton,
so. Again, it was
that's what we've
the
heard.
clubs didn't have a great deal of money, and I
Yeah.
think it's something to do with we drew them, didn't we, in the it was the FA Cup
Yeah.
or League Cup, one of the cup. Anyway, I remember as well that I remember going in to see. We drew. I was at Brighton, and I was training with Brighton in the morning, early in the week, and I was playing against the same boys on the Wednesday night or the Tuesday night. So I was training with my pal Andy Rollins in the morning, and I was kicking lumps out of him in the evening, and we were in the bar afterwards having a drink, minus his tooth, if I remember. Because I remember John Vinicum saying in the Brighton Argus, Morgan was no sooner on the pitch when Andy Rollins felt so-and-so, and Morgan was immediately booked. Still, that's no concern of ours, that's now down to Cambridge. But what he didn't realise was that me and Andy, that's what we give and took. And in the bar afterwards, that was it, we were there. And that's the way football was, give and take.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my best friend Brian Horton, who we played at Port Vale together, and they came to Brighton. I remember him, I caught him during the game, something happened in the game, he come chasing after me, wanting to sort me out, and I said, listen son, I said, I didn't do whatever happened there. I said, you'll know if I do it. I said, so, and he put his face there, I said, look, Brian, I should go away. And that was my good friend, you know. But when your allegiance is to where you're at. And afterwards, again, we were in the bar afterwards, and that's the way football was, and you remain good friends ever since. So that's how we went to Cambridge, and we lost, I think, 1-0 that night, but I think that paid for my fee.
I think it
paid
did.
for my transfer.
I think it did indeed.
That's